Everyone at the mansion treated me like I was invisible, just the quiet girl who cleaned their floors and served their tea. But when the richest man in the city walked into that ballroom with me on his arm, introducing me as his wife, their jaws dropped to the floor. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, this story will give you chills. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, this gets incredible. I still remember the first time I walked through those massive golden gates. The Wellington mansion stood before me like something out of a fairy tale, with its towering columns and perfectly manicured gardens. I was 23, fresh out of college with a degree I couldn't afford to use and desperately needed work. The job posting was simple: live-in housekeeper for wealthy family. Good pay, room and board included. It seemed like a blessing at the time. What I didn't realize was how quickly I would become invisible in that house. Mrs. Wellington barely acknowledged my existence, treating me more like a piece of furniture than a person. Her spoiled children would leave messes everywhere, knowing I'd clean them up. The butler, Harrison, would snap his fingers at me like I was a dog. I was just the maid, after all, someone to be used and forgotten. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5:30 in my tiny room in the basement. I'd put on my plain black dress and white apron, tie my hair back in a simple bun, and begin my daily routine. Dust the antiques, polish the silver, scrub the marble floors until they gleamed. I'd serve breakfast to the family, standing silently in the corner while they discussed their lavish social plans, acting like I wasn't even there. But I had dreams. Every night, I'd sit by my small window and imagine a different life. Maybe I'd use my business degree someday, start my own company, prove that I was more than just someone who cleaned up after others. Those dreams felt so far away, though, like stars I could see but never touch. Then everything changed on a Tuesday morning in April. I was in the grand dining room, carefully arranging fresh white roses in a crystal vase, when I heard voices approaching. Mr. Wellington was entertaining a business associate, someone important enough to warrant the good china and his wife's nervous fussing about appearances. I quickly finished with the flowers and headed to the kitchen to prepare the coffee service. My hands shook slightly as I arranged the delicate porcelain cups on the silver tray. These business meetings always made me nervous because I knew one small mistake could cost me my job. When I entered the dining room with the tray, I kept my eyes down as usual. But as I began pouring the coffee, I could feel someone watching me. It was different from the usual dismissive glances I was used to. This felt warm, curious. I risked a quick look up and found myself staring into the most beautiful brown eyes I'd ever seen. The man sitting across from Mr. Wellington was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and a kind smile that made my heart skip. He was clearly wealthy. His suit probably cost more than I made in 6 months, but there was something different about him, something genuine. "Thank you," he said softly as I poured his coffee, not the absent-minded grunt I usually received, but an actual thank you. His voice was warm, with just a hint of curiosity. "I'm Alexander, by the way, Alexander Cross." I nearly dropped the coffee pot. Everyone in the city knew that name. Cross Industries was one of the largest companies in the country, and Alexander Cross was its young billionaire CEO. I'd seen his picture in magazines, but those photos hadn't captured the warmth in his eyes or the way he looked at me like I actually mattered. "Isabella," I managed to whisper, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I wasn't supposed to introduce myself to guests. "Mrs. Wellington would be furious if she knew." "Isabella," he repeated, and the way he said my name made it sound like music. "That's a beautiful name." I finished serving the coffee and hurried back to the kitchen, my heart pounding. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about those kind eyes and the way he'd actually seen me. Not just the maid, but me, Isabella. I thought that would be the end of it. Men like Alexander Cross didn't notice girls like me beyond a polite moment. But I was wrong. 2 weeks later, he was back, and again the following month. Each time, he'd find a way to talk to me, even if it was just to ask how my day was going or compliment something small, like how nicely I'd arranged the flowers. One afternoon, I was dusting the library when he appeared in the doorway. Mr. Wellington was on a phone call in his study, and we were alone for the first time. My pulse quickened as he walked closer, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. "You know," he said, studying the books on the shelf, "I've always loved libraries. There's something peaceful about them, don't you think?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He was so close I could smell his cologne, something expensive and sophisticated that made my head spin. "Do you like to read, Isabella?" he asked, turning to face me with that gentle smile. Yes, when I have time," I admitted. "I studied literature in college." His eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Really? What was your favorite subject?" And just like that, we were talking, really talking. Not the polite small talk of employer and employee, but a real conversation between two people. He told me about his favorite authors, and I shared mine. He asked about my dreams, and for the first time in months, I felt like someone actually cared about my answer. From that day forward, our conversations became the highlight of my week. He'd always find moments when we could talk privately, learning about my life, my hopes, my fears. I discovered that despite his wealth and success, Alexander was lonely. The pressure of running a billion-dollar company, the constant scrutiny from the media, the people who only wanted to be close to him for his money, it had left him feeling isolated. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just be normal, he confided one evening. We were in the garden where I'd been watering the roses. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and he looked almost vulnerable in the soft light. Normal is overrated, I said, surprised by my own boldness. You're changing the world with your company, that's not normal, but it's incredible. He looked at me with such intensity that I felt my cheeks flush. You really believe that? Of course I do. You're not just wealthy, Alexander, you're kind and thoughtful, and you actually listen when people talk. That's rare. Something shifted between us in that moment. The air felt charged, electric. When he reached out to touch my hand, I didn't pull away. His skin was warm, his touch gentle, and I felt something I'd never experienced before, a connection that went beyond words. The next morning, I found a single red rose on my windowsill with a note, "For the most genuine person I've ever met." My heart soared. I pressed the rose to my chest, breathing in its sweet fragrance, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, truly valued. Our relationship bloomed like those roses in the garden. Alexander would leave little gifts for me, books he thought I'd enjoy, flowers, handwritten notes that made me smile for hours. We'd steal moments together whenever he visited, talking about everything and nothing, sharing our dreams and fears. One evening, he asked me to dinner. Not at the mansion, but at a small Italian restaurant downtown. I was terrified. What if someone saw us? What if Mrs. Wellington found out? But the hope in his eyes made it impossible to say no. I wore my best dress, which wasn't much compared to what he was probably used to, but Alexander's face lit up when he saw me. "You look beautiful," he said, and I believed him because he looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. The restaurant was cozy and intimate, with soft lighting and the gentle sound of violin music in the background. Alexander had chosen it carefully, he told me, because he wanted me to feel comfortable. We talked for hours, sharing stories from our childhoods, laughing until our sides hurt, and I felt like I was living in a dream. When we walked outside afterward, the city lights twinkling around us like stars, Alexander stopped and turned to face me. "Isabella," he said softly, "I know this is complicated, but I can't stop thinking about you. You make me feel like myself again, not just the CEO or the billionaire, but just me." Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed me. It was soft and sweet and perfect, and I felt like I was floating. When we broke apart, I was breathless. "I feel the same way," I whispered, and his smile was brighter than all the city lights combined. We began meeting regularly after that, always in secret. He'd pick me up after my work was done, and we'd go for drives along the coast, have picnics in secluded parks, or just sit and talk in his car under the stars. Every moment felt precious, stolen from a world that would never understand. Alexander was nothing like the cold, calculating businessman the media portrayed. He was funny and gentle, bringing me flowers just because he knew they made me smile. He'd remember little things I mentioned, like how I loved the smell of rain or how I missed my grandmother's chocolate chip cookies. One day, he surprised me with a batch made by his personal chef, following my grandmother's exact recipe that I'd mentioned weeks earlier. The more time we spent together, the deeper I fell. He made me feel like I was worthy of love, like I deserved good things. When I was with him, I forgot about the dismissive looks from the Wellington family, the way they treated me like I was beneath them. Alexander saw me for who I really was, and he loved what he saw. 3 months into our secret relationship, he planned something special. He told me to pack a bag for the weekend, but wouldn't tell me where we were going. I was nervous and excited as we drove to the private airport where his jet was waiting. "Alexander, where are we going?" I asked, still in disbelief that this was happening to me. "Somewhere we can just be ourselves," he said, taking my hand. "No hiding, no pretending, just us." The island was paradise, white sand beaches, crystal clear water, and a private resort where we were the only guests. For 3 days, we lived in our own perfect world. We walked on the beach at sunrise, had breakfast in bed, spent hours just talking and laughing. Alexander was playful and relaxed in a way I'd never seen before, chasing me through the waves and spinning me around until we both collapsed in the sand, breathless with laughter. On our last night, we had dinner on the beach under a canopy of stars. The table was set with candles and flowers, and the gentle sound of waves provided the perfect soundtrack. I'd never felt so cherished, so completely happy. "Isabella," Alexander said, his voice suddenly serious. He reached across the table and took my hands. "These past few months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what real love feels like, not the shallow relationships I'm used to, but something deep and true and beautiful. My heart was pounding as he stood up and walked around to my side of the table. When he dropped to one knee and pulled out a small velvet box, I gasped. I know this is crazy, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I know our worlds are different and I know people will have opinions. But I don't care about any of that. I love you, Isabella. I love your kindness, your strength, your beautiful heart. Will you marry me? Through my tears, I could barely whisper yes, but it was enough. He slipped the ring on my finger, a simple, elegant diamond that caught the moonlight like a star, and kissed me with all the passion and love I'd ever dreamed of. We were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at a chapel overlooking the ocean. Just us, the minister, and two witnesses Alexander had flown in. It was perfect and intimate and everything I'd ever wanted. As we exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. But reality was waiting for us back home. We agreed to keep our marriage secret while we figured out how to navigate the complexities of our different worlds. I moved into a small apartment that Alexander helped me find, and we continued to meet in private while he dealt with the demands of his business. It was hard, living a double life. I got a job at a small bookstore, finally able to leave the mansion and the Wellington family behind. But I missed Alexander terribly during our time apart, and I could see the strain on him too. He was tired of hiding, tired of pretending our love was something to be ashamed of. The breaking point came 6 months later. The annual charity gala was approaching, one of the biggest social events of the year. Every wealthy family in the city would be there, including the Wellingtons. Alexander had been attending alone for years, always the eligible bachelor that mothers tried to set up with their daughters. I don't want to go alone this year, he told me one evening as we sat in my small apartment sharing takeout Chinese food. I'm tired of pretending, Isabella. I want the world to know that I'm married to the most amazing woman I've ever met. I was terrified. The thought of facing all those people, especially the Wellingtons, made me feel sick. But I could see how much this meant to Alexander, and I realized I was tired of hiding too. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Let's do it. The day of the gala, Alexander surprised me with a team of stylists. They transformed me with a stunning emerald green gown that hugged my curves perfectly, professional hair and makeup that made me feel like a movie star, and jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. You're breathtaking, Alexander said when he saw me, and the awe in his voice made me feel like I could conquer the world. The hotel ballroom was magnificent, filled with crystal chandeliers and elegant decorations. As we walked up the red carpet, photographers snapped pictures, and I could hear the murmur of surprised voices. Alexander kept his arm around my waist, steady and reassuring. Inside, the whispers started immediately. I could see people recognizing me, pointing and talking behind their hands. The Wellingtons were there, and Mrs. Wellington's face went pale when she saw me. But Alexander held his head high, introducing me to everyone we met. I'd like you to meet my wife, Isabella, he would say, and I watched their faces change from confusion to shock to forced politeness. Some people were genuinely kind, congratulating us and welcoming me warmly. Others were clearly struggling to process the fact that Alexander Cross had married his former maid. The moment I'll never forget came when we approached the Wellington family. Mrs. Wellington looked like she'd seen a ghost, her mouth opening and closing without words. Her spoiled children stared at me in disbelief, probably wondering how the girl who used to clean their rooms was now wearing diamonds and designer gowns. Eleanor, Alexander said smoothly, I'd like you to meet my wife, Isabella Cross. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Wellington's face cycled through several emotions, shock, embarrassment, and something that might have been respect. Finally, she managed to extend her hand. Congratulations, she said stiffly, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was realizing that she'd treated the future Mrs. Cross like dirt, and the social implications were probably keeping her up at night. But you know what? I didn't feel vindicated or superior. I felt free. Free from the weight of their judgment, free from the belief that I wasn't good enough. Standing there in that ballroom, with Alexander's arm around me and his love surrounding me like armor, I realized that my worth had never been determined by how they saw me. The rest of the evening was magical. Alexander and I danced to our favorite song, and I felt like I was floating. People who had never noticed me before were suddenly eager to talk, to be associated with the new Mrs. Cross. But the only opinion that mattered was my own, and that of the man who loved me exactly as I was. Later that night, as we sat on the balcony of our penthouse overlooking the city, I reflected on the incredible journey that had brought us here. From invisible maid to beloved wife, from feeling worthless to knowing I was cherished, it seemed impossible, but it was real. Do you ever regret it? I asked Alexander, curled up against his side, marrying someone from a different world. He tilted my chin up so I was looking into his eyes. Isabella, you didn't come from a different world, you came from a better one, a world where people are valued for who they are, not what they have. You taught me that love isn't about status or money or impressing other people. It's about finding someone who sees your soul and loves what they find there. He kissed me softly, and I tasted the salt of happy tears on my lips. Besides, he added with a grin, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. The board of directors can complain all they want, but they can't argue with the fact that I've never been happier or more successful than I am with you by my side. And it was true. Our love story became the stuff of legend in social circles. Some people whispered about the maid who married the billionaire, but most came to see what Alexander saw, that I was exactly the kind of woman he needed. Someone who loved him for himself, who kept him grounded, who reminded him that there was more to life than profit margins and stock prices. We moved into a beautiful home overlooking the ocean, and I finally felt like I belonged somewhere. Alexander encouraged me to pursue my dreams, and I started a nonprofit organization focused on helping young women from disadvantaged backgrounds get access to education and career opportunities. It became my passion, my way of giving back and helping other girls who might be feeling invisible just like I once did. The Wellington family, by the way, tried to reconnect with me after the gala. Mrs. Wellington sent flowers and an invitation to lunch, suddenly interested in being friends with Alexander's wife, but I politely declined. I wasn't interested in revenge or making them feel bad, but I also wasn't about to pretend that their past treatment of me didn't matter. Some evenings, Alexander and I would walk through the garden of our home, and I'd think about that scared young woman who used to clean floors and dream of a different life. She could never have imagined this, the love, the happiness, the sense of purpose and belonging. But she deserved it all along. We all do. The best part isn't the money or the social status or even the fairy tale ending. It's the daily love Alexander and I share, the way he still brings me flowers just because, the way he listens to my dreams and helps me achieve them, the way he looks at me like I'm the most precious thing in his world. And the way I've learned to see myself through his eyes, not as just the maid, but as Isabella, beautiful, valuable, worthy of love. Our story proves that love really can conquer all social barriers, financial differences, other people's opinions. When two people truly see and value each other, nothing else matters. And sometimes, the person who seems invisible is actually the one who shines the brightest. If this story touched your heart, show some love with a like and subscribe for more incredible true stories like this one. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who later realized your worth? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, remember that your value isn't determined by how others see you, but by how you see yourself. You are worthy of love, respect, and all the beautiful things life has to offer. Never let anyone make you feel invisible again.